Hey, Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Okay, I need to turn volume up. Say again.
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Good. I couldn't hear you. I had my volume off. Okay, what a week. How you doing?
Pretty good for a Monday.
It's been a long day. It has. And I am really, really sorry about those problem solution videos. You wouldn't believe how much time went into preparing them, making them to begin with. And when I looked at the problems for the two editions of the books, they looked like the same, but they weren't quite. So I assume you got my email about deleting those YouTube videos of problem solutions and posting a hard copy, Word file of the problem solutions out of the book.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Ooh. Just noticing where you are, it looks like there's a lot more light. I look like I'm in the dark, but oh well. Did you watch the game? Silly question, isn't it?
Actually, I don't watch too much football.
I watched this one because there were two so evenly matched teams. Usually Super Bowls are blowout and a bore, but these lived up to the billing. And I like that Kansas City coach. He had won more games in pro football than any other coach who had not won the Super Bowl. So he was due. You know, here you go. You tell me you're not into football, and here all I do is talk about it. Sorry about that. Sarah, good evening.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Hello,
Which Sarah?
Wilkerson.
Howdy.
Hello.
All I'm seeing is the word Sarah. Before I get started on chapter 10 tonight, I need to go over with you the structure of the midterm exam, just to clarify what you'll need to do next weekend when you get into it. Let me play with this a little bit and see what happens. You guys see a whiteboard and a smiley face now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that delayed response had me going. There we go. So where's your comfort index with regard to this exam coming up? Nurses always ask, where's your pain level of 1 to 10? Where's your comfort index? Is it that 10 is extremely confident?
About a 3 or 4 right now.
Yeah, you'll get it up there by the weekend. Caleb, good evening.
Good evening.
I've never done real well with word problems or stuff like that. If the info's there and the formula's there, then I can usually handle it pretty well. But being able to read out of a paragraph what it's looking for and all, I usually struggle with. That's why I'm a little worried.
You know how you fix worry, don't you? Preparation.
Yeah, I'm definitely doing that.
It also helps with stress if you're worried about it. But I'm glad you mentioned word problems, because I did want to tell you this, old class. There's a term in education called smoke, and it refers to a problem having more information than you need for what's asked. For instance, I might give you all the information that you'd need to apply the corporate valuation model, sort of like the case, but then only ask for the horizon value. Or I might only ask for the cost of capital. So be aware of that. The good news is you don't have to remember information from a case. Everything you need to be there. The problem is, in some cases, it's more information than you need, but
I'd much rather more information than like in the book where it was like, gave you a little bit of information that you have to plug into one ratio, to plug into another ratio, to plug into another ratio.
Yep. Andrew, I can see the top of your head. You might want to adjust your camera, but then again, hey, if you do whatever you're comfortable with, we don't have to see you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Jeff, good evening. Can you hear me? Jeffrey, good evening.
Oh, yes, sorry. had my speakers on mute.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make you jump. Actually, let me see if I can relocate my camera. It's a little bit more of a head-on shot. Again, this is like that movie Tootsie. I can't get the thing far enough away from me where I look okay, but well, guys, while we're in this silence, do any of you have questions about I do have a few emails from 2 or 3 people that I need to respond to in the class, but Sarah, I think I have one from you.
Yes.
Your camera's not on, but if you don't want it on, that's fine.
So you just mentioned everything we need will be there. I was just wondering about the bond rating. We don't need to, because I don't want to crowd up my sheet with all unnecessary things.
No.
Okay.
And I'll give you a little piece of advice too.
Yes.
I know you're going to have like I think I'm allowing 2 sheets of prepared notes front and back. But honestly, you should prepare for the exam as if you're not going to have those sheets.
Mm.
If that makes any sense. The students that do really well will not rely heavily on those sheets.
Well, I'm like the other young man just said initially. The red herrings, that's what gets me. Having extra information or not enough, you have to do all this, that's what freaks me out, and then I get all flustered at that point.
Focus on what's being asked. You know, some students will see a problem and they won't look at what's being asked for and just jump into solving everything about the problem. That's the extent of my wisdom on the subject. I'm hearing weird noise. Are you guys hearing? Suddenly it stopped. No? Is anybody hearing that sort of a garbling? Okay. Glad it's not just me. Well, I've got a couple of minutes till. I guess we could go ahead and get started. First thing I want to cover, the exam. You're going to have 11 problems. I'm getting feedback. I don't think it's on this. Anyway, you're going to have 11 problems. They're 10-point problems, problems 1 through 11. You work any 9 and send your solutions to me. So in essence, you're allowed to omit 2 of those 11 problems. Then problem 12 is a 10-point spreadsheet problem. You can't omit it. But when you send it, basically you're going to sit down, you're going to work the exam. When you finish, I want each problem on a separate sheet of paper, scratch sheet. So you're going to have 10 pictures to take and send to me. And I want you to use the following method of labeling for the file names. You know, if you're Jane Doe and you work problem 2, I want that file name to be Jane Doe Prob 2. And of course, it'll be a JPG file, the picture. And for your work for problem 2, take a picture, send it. Then for problem 3, same deal. So on my end, it's going to be a grading nightmare. I'm going to get 10 pictures from each of you. 9 of them will be the problems out of those 11 that you choose to work. And then, of course, the 10th picture will be that spreadsheet problem. And the spreadsheet problem is not gargantuan. It's a whole lot like the ones. Well, no, wait, I haven't been giving you spreadsheet problems. I've been letting you turn them in groups. But basically, you'll see a spreadsheet that'll look a whole lot like one of the 3 that you've done for cases. And there'll be a particular cell. And I'll ask you, what Excel formula would you put in that spreadsheet cell to accomplish the desired end. And of course, all spreadsheet formulas begin with what? In Excel. An
Equal sign.
Yep. Briante, good evening.
Good afternoon or good evening.
Do you guys follow me on the format for the exam? Okay, two things. I won't be getting this back to you as quickly as I have been the weekend problems. For one thing, I don't think I can get it all graded by Monday morning anyway. But also, I have a student who's going to go on a business trip this weekend. I'm going to extend his time so that he can take it on a Monday, since he won't be able to take it Saturday or Sunday. So I'd really like to get his exam, get them all graded before I send them back out to you. Well, I won't send them out to you. I'll post them for share, just like we have been doing the spreadsheets and the regular problems.
Dr. Cudd, do we, when we take the exam, do we finish the exam and then take pictures of our?
That's my plan. Yeah, Shannon, that's what I'm thinking.
So we're not still proctored and then watching us take pictures and all that.
I don't see any reason for you to have to be proctored while you're taking the pictures and sending them to me. The big thing is I want them pretty quickly. I mean, don't wait several hours. What I've been putting in my syllabus is approximately 30 minutes. I'm not going to put a clock on it. I know to take 10 pictures and send them is going to take obviously a little bit longer time, but as soon as you finish the exam, then take the pics and send them, if you will. Does that make sense? It seems like it would be disruptive to try to do it during the exam one by one.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure. I mean, there's nothing to click to submit.
No, it's a very good question. Honestly, I hadn't even thought it out until you just brought it up. But, well, what do you guys think? I think that's a format that should work okay.
I think so too. And I think a lot of times on ProctorU, it does not allow you to have your cell phone near you, which would make it hard to take those pictures and be proctored.
Look, guys, none of you dislike ProctorU as much as I do. You have no idea.
I don't know. I'll give you a run.
I'm just praying it works.
With you right there.
Well, I've had problems that your imagination can't even take you to, but there is not another good alternative. I'm waiting for a good alternative to pop up.
I've had my computer shut down on me 3 and 4 times in the middle of a test.
Oh, all you have to do is lose an internet connection.
That's it.
Yeah. Look, you've got my cell phone number, right?
Yes.
If anything weird happens, call me or give the number to the proctor and tell them, well, actually, they have my number. They have my cell phone number, which brings me to something else. If you put your cursor over midterm exam, there'll be some wordage that says you need a password. You don't. It's been supplied to the proctor. But just in case, this is the password, okay? Nothing creative. FIN, all caps, 6541. Midterm, capital M. But as I said, I've been using ProctorU for years now. Students have never had to provide a password. That's It's part of the information we provide to proctors.
And just to confirm, we don't put any answer in the actual Moodle. We just
No. All you use Moodle for is to see the problem. Once I get all your picks, the whichever 9 problems of the 11 you work, plus the spreadsheet problem, that 10th picture, then I go into ProctorU and I can see which specific problems you randomly drew out of each group. That's where I see the problem that you got. And
are we able to freely move around those questions, like to look at them and figure out which 9?
go forward and backward? Yeah, I think so. I don't imagine, I'm pretty certain of that. There's nothing structured to prevent that. Now, I said you're allowed to omit 2 of the first 11 problems. I'm going to assume the 2 you don't send me are the ones you're omitting. It would also be nice in your work, you know, if you're working problem 3, just at the top of the sheet, put, you know, number 3 before you start something. So I know which problem I'm looking at. I mean, I will when I go back to the into Moodle to grade everything, but that would be helpful to me.
Can that replace us renaming the pictures? Because I don't know how to rename the pictures when I take it from the iPhone.
Well, when you take a picture, it's automatically given a name. And you could just go into the file manager, I think. Am I right, guys?
I think he's talking about straight from his iPhone.
Rename it once you get it on your hard drive. Once you computer, that's when you rename it.
I'm getting a lot of feedback from some, I'm sorry. Shannon, what?
I said, yeah, you wouldn't rename it when on your phone itself. Once you transfer it to your computer's hard drive, then to your computer, then you can right click on it and rename.
Okay, because I normally just take the picture and send it from my phone, like immediately through the email on my phone, because it's easier. And
I know, Brianti, but here's the problem. You're not going to be sending 1 pic. You're going to be sending 10. So they're going to have different names. So it probably automatically will anyway if you just take 10 pictures. If you put the problem number like on your work, problem 3, problem 5, obviously I can figure that out, but it's still got to have your name in the file name. I've got 34 students. I'm going to get 10 pics from each of you. And I would really like it if you could. I mean, you know, yours could be shortened to just B. Taylor Prob, you know, 1, 7, whichever one you're working on. There we go. But if you have to put it on your hard drive, then change the name. You know, do whatever you need to do to accomplish that. But
I lost my cable, so I actually have to email them to myself from my phone and then get them out of my email and rename them and send them to you. So.
Okay, Shannon, I won't be a jerk about the time delay, okay?
No, I'm not worried about that. I'll have plenty of time to give them to you. I just have to take an extra step because I've been having to do that all semester. So anyway, no big deal.
You're accustomed to it, huh?
Really?
All right, guys, are you ready to look at chapter 10? Okay. See if I can pull it up and start a show going. Chapter 10 is on the basics of capital budgeting. It's kind of odd the author does this backwards. He assumes in this chapter you've already got the cash flows for a project and shows you some different ways to analyze them to see really all you're after is whether the project is a good idea or a bad idea. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Then in the next chapter, he backs up and shows you how to come up with the cash flows, but that's not on the midterm. Now, I'm going to use a basic example. This particular project. By the way, you do have these slides, guys, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here's a project that would require an outlay of 1,200, maybe these are in millions, today, and projections are it would bring back in 500, 600, 300, and 600 over the next 4 years. We're going to look at different methods of analyzing this project to see if it's a good idea or a bad one. The first of these methods is called the payback period. It's the oldest. It's the simplest. It's also the most flawed. By definition, it's simply the number of years required to recover the initial outlay. It answers the simple question, when do we get our money back? Now, for this project, we've got a cost, I'll go with that, of 1,200. That's the cash flow at time 0. I'm looking for my eraser to get rid of that little guy. There we go. And here are the projected cash flows for the project. What is it, 5636? To calculate the payback, you create a column you could think of as cumulative cash flows, or better yet, cumulative cash inflows. After 1 year, you've recovered 500. Obviously, you haven't recovered the 1,200 outlay yet. After 2 years, you've recovered how much? Five and 6 would be
1,100.
1,100. Have you reached the payback yet?
No, sir.
No, but you're getting close. Well, you have to go all the way through year 3. In fact, after 2 years, you've recovered 1,100. How much more do you need to recover? Another
100.
Another 100. So do you have to go all the way through year 3 to pick up that other 100?
No.
The payback for this project would be these 2 years plus a fraction of that 3rd year, or 2 1/3 years. Companies that use the payback have a cutoff. It's arbitrary, it's subjective. It doesn't even maximize shareholder wealth. But let's say the cutoff for this project, for this company, their cutoff is 3 years. Basically, what they'd be saying is they're not going to invest in a project unless they get their money back within 3 years. Based on this kind of decision rule, would this project be acceptable with its payback of 2 1/3 years?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'd accept because the payback for the project is within the cutoff. This was the first capital budgeting method created. It's the oldest. It's the simplest. But with that simplicity comes flaws. For one thing, did we consider the time value of money anywhere in here?
No.
Not at all. For example, what if the cash flows, instead of 500 and 600, what if they were 1,100 and 0? Wouldn't you prefer to get more of the cash flow earlier? Yeah, but where does that leave your payback in this particular case? Where you started. It doesn't change the payback. One weakness of the payback method, it ignores the time value of money. Another weakness, it ignores the more distant cash flows. For example, what if this last cash flow, instead of 600, what if it was 6,000? Now what's the payback? And I'll go back and change these to what they were. I may be spending too much time on this, but if I change that last cash flow to 6,000, what's the payback? It's still 2 1/3 years. The payback's one weakness, it's myopic. It focuses solely on when you get the money back. It ignores more distant cash flows, be it that occur beyond the payback point. So what kind of projects does the payback automatically put at a disadvantage? Short term or long term?
Long term.
Long term. It's automatically biased against long-term projects. And one final weakness of the payback method, its decision rule is arbitrary. Believe it or not, the American textile industry, back when it existed, had a payback of 3 years, industry-wide. No one knew why. Companies used it because it had always been used. But there was nothing that would maximize shareholder wealth about that. Any questions on the payback before we say bye-bye to it? One other thing about the payback, by the way. Some companies will use the payback as a proxy for risk. Would a shorter payback be viewed as a safer project or a riskier one?
Safer.
Safer. The quicker you get the money back, the less time you're giving to unforeseen circumstances to arise that could wreck the project. So I guess if you're looking for a good thing about the payback besides its simplicity, is it can also serve as a proxy for risk. All right. Second capital budgeting method. Sorry, guys, I'm still fumbling around. Is called net present value, NPV. By definition, it's simply the present value of all the project's cash flows. Where your discount rate, if you find present value, you've got to have a discount rate. Your discount rate is the WACC. A proper way to interpret the net present value is the net present value is how the project will impact collective shareholder wealth. So if the net present value is positive, we expect the project to increase shareholder wealth. If it's negative, we would expect it to reduce shareholder wealth. So our decision rule with the net present value method is, if the NPV is positive, accept the project. Now, if this project, because of its risk, has a cost of capital of, let's say, 13%, to calculate the net present value, you'd use the CF key of your calculator. Here are the keystrokes for the BA2 Plus, which, by the way, gives us a positive net present value. Here are the keystrokes for the HB10B2. And of course, you get the same answer. Based on this net present value, should the project be accepted or turned down?
Accepted.
We should accept it because we expect it to increase shareholder wealth. Now, I talked for a good while about the weaknesses of the payback method. It ignored time value. It ignored more distant cash flows. Does the NPV method ignore the time value of money? No. We're discounting cash flows. We're taking time value into account. Does the NPV method ignore more distant cash flows? No. We take all the cash flows of the project into account. But most importantly, the decision rule of the NPV method is designed to maximize shareholder wealth. Again, if the NPV is positive, we believe that will enhance shareholder wealth. So our decision rule is, if the NPV is positive, accept the project. If it's negative, turn it down. And don't worry about the case where it's exactly equal to zero. You won't run into it. Questions on NPV? Okay. By the way, their authors will tell you this is the superior method. We're going to look at 5, but this is considered the superior of the 5. A third method that looks a whole lot like the NPV is the profitability index. And really the only difference is, instead of subtracting the outflows, the present value of the outflows, you divide. The NPV, one definition of it was to take the present value of the inflows and subtract the present value of the outflows, which is the same as simply taking the present value of all cash flows and keeping track of the signs, keeping track of whether they're inflows or outflows. Again, the cost of capital serves as our discount rate, our time value of money. If you were to find the present value of the inflows for this project, with your calculator, you do everything the same as you did earlier to find NPV, only put in 0. Anywhere you have a negative cash flow, now put in 0. You're only putting in the inflows. And this gives you a present value of inflows of 1488.3. Were you to do this with the other calculator, same result. Note with these calculators, when it prompts us for the cash flow at time 0, we have to put in 0 so it won't lose its place. So it'll keep track of when each cash flow occurs. Now that you've got the present value of the inflows, to find the profitability index, it's like an Arnold Schwarzenegger keyboard. I got to hit it hard. By definition, the profitability index is the present value of the inflows divided by the present value of the outflows. We found the present value of the inflows were 1488.3. If these are mils, then million. The only outflow you have for this project is the 1200. And because it occurs now at t equals 0, it's already in present value form. And if you crank this out, this gives us a profitability index of 1.24. What do you think the decision rule is? Accept the project if the PI is what?
Greater than 1.
Greater than 1. And by the way, I'm going to cover 5 techniques. 4 of them will always be in agreement. The one outlier is the payback. But if the NPV tells you to accept the project, so will the profitability index. And so will the other 2 we're about to get into.
Quick question. Should we expect to see one where the other outputs are sprinkled in, as in maybe year 2? Isn't okay.
There are problems like that out of the book, and I'm so glad you brought up this. This is the one point that was sticking in my head. I couldn't remember. If I were going to advise you on how to prepare for this exam, I would start by understanding the problems in the slides. In all honesty, if you understand the problems in the slides, you'll be in pretty good shape for the exam. I didn't throw any curveballs at you.
Thank you.
Now, but some students just love more problems to work, so I gave you the ones out of the book also. And by the way, after that embarrassment of figuring out that being informed, I didn't figure it out, you guys did, that the YouTube videos that I had were not in sync. I posted the author's solutions to the problems in Word files. For students that like to work more problems, hey, have at them. And during the week, if you get stuck or you have questions, contact me. Don't hesitate. But in all honesty, the first step I would take to be well prepared for the exam, I'd look at the problems in the slides. And I would look at the problems that you worked in those 3 cases, which really are not much of an extension beyond what's in the slides anyway. And of course, for that spreadsheet problem, you will need to look at the spreadsheets for those 3 cases. But for 90% of the exam, the 9, 10-point problems you're going to choose to work and send in, if you understand the slides, you're going to be in awfully good shape for those.
Dr. Cudd, you may have covered this before I jumped on early, but with the spreadsheet problems, will it be just the blank spreadsheet like we've been working with and we fill in the formulas like that, or will it be using those spreadsheets to create new formulas?
I'll give you
That
the
makes
answer
sense.
that always drives me nuts. Yes. No, look, what it will be a spreadsheet where you give me the formula for 1 cell or 2, maybe 2, not the whole thing.
Okay.
And
So
there,
in fact, I may show you a completed spreadsheet as far as the values and ask in cell G22, what Excel formula would you put in that spreadsheet cell to accomplish the desired end?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Well, look, you're doing the spreadsheets in teams of 3. This way I don't have any free riders. I hope I make everybody look at the spreadsheets and try to understand them. Okay.
is there any,
Go ahead.
there's no matching on the exam?
No.
Okay, I guess
Yeah.
because there's all those matching problems and like dozens of them every single chapter on Moodle.
Yeah. Look, I used to give a bunch of multiple choice questions. Once again, I messed up. Well, maybe not in this sense. The matching helps you to understand the material. And for some of the problems, there are parts A, B, and C. I might, for instance, ask you for a project, calculate the profitability index. Part B, should the project be accepted and why? Part C, for this project, would you expect the NPV to be positive or negative? Remember, for everything but the payback, these methods are going to be in agreement. So if the profitability index tells you to accept the project, the NPV will tell you to accept it. So you'd find the NPV would be greater than 0. Now this is a lousy example, but a lot of the problems, some of the problems, I can't say a lot, some of the problems have multiple parts where I'll ask you to calculate something and then interpret it or show that you understand what it is showing.
Okay.
In that sense, the matching might actually help out some. But truthfully, I think you could skip the matching, and if you just go through the slides and understand the lecture, you'll be in good shape.
Awesome. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on the profitability index? One last thing. What are its strengths and weaknesses? The same as those for the NPV. Did the profitability index consider the time value of money? Yes. Did it consider all the project cash flows? Yes. Is its decision rule designed to maximize shareholder wealth? Yes. Okay. Another method. Better yet, let me get back to this thing. Well, all right, go back, Cudd. The next method, the fourth method, is called internal rate of return, IRR. And by the way, if you wonder why we have so many different capital budgeting methods, the whole idea is each measure expresses the desirability of the project a different way. The NPV expresses the value of the project in terms of the dollar value it would add to shareholder wealth. The IRR expresses the desirability of the project in terms of a rate of return. You use the IRR function on your calculator. In fact, let me show you. For this same project, then I'll go back and talk about this bond yield thing. These are the keystrokes for the BA2 plus. If you'll notice, you throw the cash flows in just like you did to find NPV, only you simply hit IRR, down arrow, compute. And you would find for this project, the expected rate of return, the IRR, is over 24%. That's the expected rate. Our minimum required rate is the cost of capital. Since at a minimum we require 13, but we expect over 20, that should be 24.24. Maybe this should be at 4. You can find out when you crank it out. Since the expected rate of return is greater than the minimum we require, the project is acceptable. If you do it with the other calculator, same thing. You put in all the cash flows, and then you hit Shift IRR. Now, after the payback, we covered 3 techniques.
It's got
NPV, profitability index, and IRR. Notice
Dr. Cudd, on my slide, it's got where you're showing get IRR equals 24.4.
Yep.
Mine is showing 24.2.
Don't worry about it. I made a typo. That's me.
Okay.
Yeah, change that. Sorry. Change that 2 to a 4.
Well, that's actually what I get is 24.2 when I work it.
I did as well.
Change them all to 24.2. I'm sorry. I can do this very quickly. 24.2 it is. All right, so just everywhere I had 24.4, put 24.2, please. What are the weaknesses of the IRR method? Strengths and weaknesses. The same as for NPV, the same as for profitability index. Does the IRR method consider the time value of money? Yes. Does it consider all the project cash flows? Yes. Is the decision rule designed to maximize shareholder wealth? Yes. And let me give you a different spin on how to interpret it, okay? If we put $1,200 in a bank account today, a year from now, it would allow us to withdraw 500, a year later, 600, a year later, 300, a year later, 600. What interest rate would that bank account have to be offering us? The IRR, 24.2%. So when you think of the IRR, you can treat it like an interest rate on a bank account. For a bank account to replicate these cash flows, the interest rate would have to be 24.2%. You good so far? Let's look at the fifth method. The IRR method, the prior method, assumes that as the cash flows start coming in, there's another project in the wings just like that one. For instance, the IRR for this project assumes that when that first 500 comes in, it can be reinvested in something else that also gives us a 24.2% return. And the 600 can be reinvested to earn 24.2. It's simply built into how it's calculated. Now, what if you run across a project and the expected rate of return, the IRR, is a lot higher than the company typically generates? What's the likelihood that the next project will give us the same rate of return? In other words, what's the likelihood that these cash flows can be reinvested to earn a rate as high as 24.2%? That's where this fifth technique comes in. We're not highly creative in finance. We decided to call this the modified internal rate of return, or the MER. Sounds like a Russian satellite, doesn't it? It provides a more conservative measure of the expected rate of return. And what it actually does is it assumes that as the cash flows come in, they're reinvested at a rate equal to the cost of capital. In other words, while the IRR would have assumed those cash flows would be reinvested to earn 24.2%, the MIRR assumes that as the cash starts coming back, it will be reinvested to earn a rate equal to, well, in this case, 13%. A lower reinvestment rate. That's why it's more conservative. Now, the calculation. What you have to do, first step, that was supposed to be a 1. Step number 1, find the future value of just the inflows. We earlier found that the present value of the inflows was what, 1488.3? So what we do is we compound that expression of the value of the inflows from year 0 to year 4 using your time value calculator, time value money bar. You're basically going to compound that 1488.3 to year 4, assuming that your time value of money is the cost of capital. We're assuming the cash flows will be reinvested to earn a more conservative rate of return. And we find the future value of the inflows. In this case, if I didn't mess up, 2426.6. So now we've re-expressed the project as consisting of an initial outlay of, what was it, 1,200? I guess this is our next step, step number 2. Basically find the MIRR. We now have a project, a 4-year project, where we put 1,200 in at the start and end up with 2426.6 at the end. And we came up with that 2426 by assuming that as those cash flows come in, we reinvest them to earn a rate equal to the WACC, a more conservative rate, 13% instead of 24 point something. So in terms of, for instance, a bank account, if you put 1,200 into an account now and 4 years later, it grew to 24 or 26.6, what would be your annual rate of return? I got 19.2%. It also is an expression of the expected rate of return on the project, but it makes the more conservative assumption that the cash, when it's reinvested, will only earn 13%, the WACC, instead of, what was it, 24.2%. Since it assumes the cash flows are reinvested to earn a lower rate of return, the project doesn't look quite as good. Our expected rate of return is now 19.2%, but it is still greater than the cost of capital. So we'd accept, because the MIRR is greater than our minimum required rate of return. It just doesn't make the project look quite as good as the IRR. The IRR said this project's expected rate of return is over 24%. The MIRR gives a more conservative, maybe more realistic expected rate of return of a little over 19. The decision rule is still the same though. If the MIRR is greater than the WACC, you accept the project. If the expected rate of return is greater than the minimum we require, you accept the project. And at this point, you should note that everything but the payback, well, actually, the payback also said accepted, but NPV, profitability index, IRR, MIRR will always be in agreement. If any one of the four say accept the project, all four will.
So you couldn't have a you couldn't have an IRR that was like barely above your WACC and the MIRR be barely below the WACC?
It won't be below the WACC, it'll squeeze in between. For example, if you had, let's say you've got, let's get away from this problem just for a second. Let's say you've got a WACC of 10% and the IRR is 10.2%. The MIRR will be in between. It'll still say accept, but it won't make the project look quite as good as the IRR. The MER is always between the cost of capital and the IRR. Shannon, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Does that also work on the flip side, that it doesn't make it look quite as good, but if it says reject, it's going to make it look not quite as bad?
Yeah. If any one of the methods say reject the project, all four will.
But the MER will always come between
But
the
the
WACC.
MER will be between the IRR and the WACC. So you're right. What if you've got a WACC of 15% and the IRR works out to be 12? What will the MER be? In between. The MER will be somewhere in between, maybe 13. For an unacceptable project, the MER will make it look not quite as bad as the IRR. It's just the nature of the math that the MER will always be between the WACC and the IRR. So for acceptable projects, the IRR will make the project look better than the MER, even though both will say accept. For an unacceptable project like the one I just drew, because the MER is between the IRR and the WACC, it'll still say reject the project, but the MER will not make it look quite as bad as the IRR, if that makes sense. If the MER is always between the two, then for good projects, the MER will not allow the project to look quite as good as the IRR. For bad projects like this one, it'll actually make it look a little bit better than the IRR. Good question, but I'm spending too much time on the point. But it's a good observation. And what about the weaknesses of the MER? Same as NPV, IRR, profitability index. It considers the time value of money. It considers all the cash flows. And it has a decision rule designed to maximize shareholder wealth. All right. This is another way to look at it. That reinvestment rate. You know, the reinvestment rate is the opportunity cost of funds. If we think we could have reinvested them to earn 13%, then that's our time value of money, our opportunity cost of funds. If you take the methods, the payback, because it ignores time value of money, assumes the opportunity cost of funds is 0.
It's 8 o'clock.
Oh no. I have not. Did that come from you guys? Did you hear something say it's 8 o'clock with a British accent?
I heard it. I don't know where it came from.
Okay. Okay, so the payback method ignores the time value of money. It assumes as the money comes in, you bury it in a shoebox in the yard. The interesting thing is 3 methods have the same time value of money. With the NPV, you use the WACC as your discount rate. You do the same with the profitability index. And actually with the MER, because you use it to compound cash flow forward, you're also assuming it's the opportunity cost of funds or time value of money. The one method that has a different time value of money, opportunity cost of funds, is the IRR, because it assumes whatever the project's IRR is, that's what you'll earn on reinvesting the cash flows. So the assumed opportunity cost of funds for the IRR is the project IRR. The more unusually high that project IRR is, the less realistic that reinvestment rate assumption. All right, I've got a couple of little things to polish this off. What is the difference between independent and mutually exclusive projects? With independent projects, you evaluate each one separately. You decide to accept or reject based on the project in isolation. But if projects are mutually exclusive, that means you accept one or the other, but not both. So you have to rank them. For instance, let's assume that the project we've been looking at, let's assume we've got a company with a plant on a river. And that project is what it would cost to build a bridge across the river, to have transportation across the river. Another project is the creation of a new product by the company. If that were the case, those two projects would be independent. One would have nothing to do with the other, which means you could accept both, reject both. You evaluate each one in isolation. But what if project that we just looked at was to build a bridge, and another project was to invest in some tugboats and barges to transport your goods across the river? Would you invest in transports and barges and also invest in a bridge? No. They'd be mutually exclusive projects. So you'd want to go with the better of the two projects. You'd need to rank them some way. And here's what's interesting. All of the capital budgeting methods we've covered are flawed if you try to rank projects, except for the NPV. So if you're going to rank mutually exclusive projects, competing projects, where you're going to choose one or the other, but not both, use the NPV method. I don't want to keep you here all night, so I don't want to go into all the little details, but you'll find them in the slides when you go through those. Another situation can come up where you have competing projects, but their lives don't match up. They're mutually exclusive. You're going to invest in one or the other, but not both. And they are repeatable. But they have unequal lives. For example, just to keep things small scale, what if you're going to invest in a truck? And you could either buy a truck that would last 4 years, or you could buy one that would last 2 years. Of course, the catch is if you always need a truck, if they're repeatable, and you invest in the 2-year truck, you would have to, 2 years from now, invest in it again. What do you do when you have competing projects, mutually exclusive projects, but they have unequal lives? There are two approaches. One is called the common life approach. With the common life approach, you assume you repeat investment in one or both projects until you reach a common ending point. For example, let's say these are the two, and I'll come back to the second method in a second. Whoops. Let's say we've got project A, and it's a 4-year project, and it involves, forget about the bridge. Let's say it involves, to keep things simple, a truck. If we buy truck A, it'll last 4 years. But we could buy a cheaper truck, truck B, that would only last 2 years. Of course, the catch is, if we buy truck B 2 years from now, we're going to have to buy another one. So for the common life approach, you assume that you repeat, in this case, repeat project B to show what the cash flows would be if you go with truck B and get 4 years of use out of it. That column of red cash flows would be the cash flows from investing in project B, truck B, twice. Those would be the cash flows for you to have 4 years use of truck B. Now, if you calculate the NPV for these projects, we already found the NPV for project A. My gosh, what just happened? Where was I? Right there. All right. It was easy. No. Sorry, went too far. Here we go.
18.
So if you invest in project A, you've got an NPV of 288.3, if I recall. If you invest in project B twice, then you've got a common life NPV for project B. If you crank this out, I got 290.7. So which path gives you the greater common life NPV? Investing in project B twice. If I had a 9-year project and compared it to a 3-year project, to get the common life NPV for the 3-year project, I'd have to assume I'm investing in it 3 times to get all of the cash flows that would span 9 years. But you choose, with a common life approach, you choose the project with a greater common life NPV. And basically, that's the approach. The other method, besides the common life NPV approach, the other method is called the equivalent annual annuity. The first step, oh, by the way, I did give you the keystrokes, I think, for both calculators to find the common life NPV. For project B, and the common life NPV for A is just its NPV, since we're comparing a 4-year and 2-year project. The next method, the other method, is called the equivalent annual annuity approach. And with it, you find the basic NPV of each project. Then you express what that would be equivalent to in terms of an annual annuity. For example, we found the basic NPV for project A, again, was this thing, 288.3, right? If we were to find the basic NPV of this 2-year project, we'd find the basic NPV for project B is 163. So then we find what each project is equivalent to in terms of an annual annuity. The NPV for project A was 288.3. So we use our time value of money calculator. We note that project A has a 4-year life. We're using the cost of capital of 13%. And its net present value is 288.3. So we solve for what that would be equivalent to in terms of an annual annuity. This thing. And that would be its equivalent annual annuity. The equivalent annual annuity for project A, this works out to 96.9 mil, if these are mil. For project B, its basic NPV was 163. And it is a 2-year project. Again, we use our cost of capital of 13%. Treat the NPV as if we're investing it and figure out what that would give us in terms of the annual annuity. And for B, that works out to be 97.7, if these are mil. You could take the basic NPV and divide by 4 and divide by 2, but then you wouldn't be considering the time value of money. Since the equivalent annual annuity of B is greater than A, it would again tell us, choose B. The common life approach and the equivalent annual annuity approach will lead to the same decision. And again, you use this when you're comparing mutually exclusive projects, but that have unequal lives. Now, I know this is a lot, but you're getting a crash version on a Monday night Zoom class. You're ready for the very last item. You'll like it, it's simpler. Or do you have questions on this? Okay. Some companies, oh, by the way, these are the keystrokes to find that basic NPV for project B. Some companies invest in projects hoping they'll draw offers. When my mother was in a retirement home, one of the other mothers there had a son that started some kind of technology company on a shoestring. And within 2 years, he was offered like $50 million for it. The whole idea was to attract offers. So it answers the simple question. If you're looking at a project, should you abort it sooner than planned? For example, consider project, is it G? Running out of letters. Here's project G on the next slide. These are the project's basic cash flows. But over on the right, we have projections of potential abandonment values. For example, we think that if we run the project for 2 years, we could then sell it for 600. When you're looking at abandonment analysis, what you want to do is calculate the NPV for each possible life of the project. For example, if you calculate the basic NPV, and that would be the case where you keep the project for 3 years. With a 3-year life, the NPV of project G would work out to be 16.8 mil. All right? Now, what if you run the project for 2 years and then abandon it? What would be your cash flows? With a 2-year life, your cash flows would be the 1,000 you shell out at the start. Your operating cash flows from year 1 would be 400. Then in year 2, you'd have cash flows from operations of 450, but also that abandonment value of 600. So if you sold the project after 2 years, you'd get an NPV of, I came up with 141.8. And of course, if you decided to hold the project 1 year and sell it, then your cash flows would look like this. At t equals 0, you'd shell out the 1,000. You'd run it 1 year. You'd have cash flows from operations for the first year of 400. And then, of course, you'd get that abandonment value, what you'd sell it for, which I think was 650. And if you calculated the NPV based on a 1-year life, not so good. if we have confidence in these projections, then I'm looking for a different color. What should we do? Should we invest in the project? And secondly, if we invest in it, how long should we plan to operate it before we sell it?
Invest in it and keep it for 2 years.
Invest in it and keep it for 2 years. That gives us the highest NPV. I'm not showing you where we come up with these cash flows. Actually, in the next chapter, the first chapter after the midterm, we get into that some. I have no idea. Well, I do. But there are a variety of ways that companies could get some kind of handle on what they think they could sell their company for after a certain time period. Any questions on what was covered tonight? And silence fell over the room. So once again, I can clear this because I know it's being recorded and you can look at it in the recording. When you take your test next weekend, work all the problems that you pick 9 of the 11, work them. Work that 12th problem, which is a spreadsheet problem. Do the work for each problem on a separate sheet of paper. So when you finish the exam, you ought to have 10 sheets of work. Once you finish the exam, take a picture of each sheet of work and email it to me. And, do it immediately after you finish the exam. And I'm hoping you will put your name and the problem number in the file name you're sending to me, that pick. So, Shannon Gorey problem 6.jpg. Shannon Gorey problem 7.jpg, and so on. I am concerned about keeping track of which pick goes with which problem if you do otherwise. In fact, I want 2 ways to keep track, sort of a cross-check. I'd like to see the problem number in the file name. And then on the sheet where you work the problem, start it out with, like number 6, yada, yada, yada. Guys, I'm never going to play poker with you. I can't read your faces at all. I don't know if you're following this or how many of you feel like you've got a grip on this? Okay.
On this is in like the midterm. This is in like what you covered tonight. What you mean?
Well, no, I wasn't asking that broad of a question. I was really asking about the format for sending me the pictures of your work for the midterm.
Like for the spreadsheet, you said you just wanted the formula. So do you want us to just write the formula down on our paper and take a picture and that's it?
Yeah, look.
Okay.
You might have something like this. I might ask, all right, this would be number 12. Sorry. Oh, this thing's going nuts on me. All right. And I might ask about 2 cells. So in cell, I don't know, G27, you give me the formula. You know, maybe it equals B9 times 1 minus T7, something like that. If I ask for 2 of them, maybe in cell C6, you got equals J10 times 1 plus B5 raised to the 3rd power or something like that. Excel formulas. That would be sufficient. Guys,
Would it actually be in a spreadsheet where we can type the formula in and make sure the answer calculates right?
Nope. All I'm going to give you for the spreadsheet is a picture of it. I'm going to show you the row and column numbers. So you know which cell is G27. But you're going to have just a picture of it. But it will include the row and column labels.
Will we be able to use a spreadsheet to put that data into?
Nope.
That bites.
Agreed.
Even on our case quiz this week, it was supposed to be, I had the formula right, but my answer was not, I kept plugging the value I was supposed to change it to in the spreadsheet. And when I worked the formula, it never came out to what my spreadsheet was just saying. And I even had written at the bottom of my case that, hey, I know this answer is not correct. I've got the solution right. I didn't know if I was order of operations or whatever, but I was subtracting 10.2 instead of, it was 10.2%. And I was subtracting 10.2 minus the growth rate instead of 0.10, instead of 0.102.
I remember it.
But
you didn't keep it all decimal.
Spreadsheet, I would have just assumed the answer was right and just kept on. So
yeah,
but we can't do that on the test.
Hopefully not. I mean, hopefully you'll keep it all decimal. It's supposed to be decimal. You know, like horizon value would be the cash flow for the next year. If this is horizon value in year 3, then this would be free cash flow in year 3 times 1 plus the growth rate over the cost of capital minus G. And if the growth rate were 6%, then this would need to be 0.06.
Right, it's on the bottom where I got it wrong. I had
And the cost of capital, if it's 15, then this would need to be 0.15. I didn't do it, the mathematicians did. It's a algebraic time value function. So every interest rate or rate of return measure has to go in decimal form.
I suppose you could put 15 and then hit percent and it would convert it to the 0.15 for you as well.
There you go.
If you're using a spreadsheet, but not if you're writing it on paper. That was my whole for bringing that up. You can't use a spreadsheet to do that.
Yeah, if you're calculating a problem, which you will be, a bunch of them, you want to use the formula the right way. So to get the right answer, you'd have to put in decimal values for these, right?
Well, I think even if that's the case, you said there's a possibility you may give us the answer for it and tell us to find a formula. So only thing you're doing is just making sure it checks, right?
Only on the spreadsheet itself, problem number 12. I may show you a spreadsheet with all the values filled in, but not the formulas. And I may ask you what formula was used, for example, in cell G27 to come up with that value. You don't really need to worry about what the value is. You need to know the logic of the spreadsheet, and that relates to whichever case you were using it on, and what you should have to come up with that given value.
Well, will we be able to assume that any, like the growth or the cost of capital that's shown on the spreadsheet will automatically be in percentages?
Yep.
Okay. Even if the little percent sign's not shown behind it?
Yep.
And I ask because some of the case spreadsheets are that way. They're coming as whole numbers.
Yeah. No, we'll assume that it's in the spreadsheet. It'll either be shown, for instance, if the cost of capital is 15%, it'll either show up as 15% or 0.15 in that cell where you're looking. Then, of course, you don't have to convert. You can just refer to the cell. If that's cell G20, then all you'd have to do is, well, it wouldn't be like this. It would be, well, you'd use G20 to refer to that cost of capital. You're not going to need to worry.
So our answer would actually have the cell reference and not the value of the cell.
Exactly, exactly. Exactly. And to respond to Jeff's concern, whatever cell that cost of capital is in, we'll assume it's in decimal form. If it's in percent form, the spreadsheet will interpret it in decimal form. If it appears as 15%, the spreadsheet will treat it as if that's 0.15. I think the point is so basic, I'm running it into the ground. I'm sorry about that. All right, the fearsome foursome. Lowest attendance yet. I don't know what that means. Any other questions before we adjourn?
Do you think that, I know we're allotted 3 hours, do you think it's going to take the entire 3 hours to do the test, or?
Reality, that'll vary from one student to the next. Some students are just faster. Do I think the 3 hours is sufficient time? Absolutely. Some of you may finish it in an hour. I'm not kidding. Some may take longer. I wanted you to have plenty of time, and I really think that'll do it.
No chance we can answer all 11 and you take the best 9.
I knew you were going to ask me that. Nope. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make a confidence statement. You're going to have to send the 9 to me that you have confidence in.
Have you already set the exam up on ProctorU?
Say that again.
Last week I tried to register for the midterm and it said it was not available to register for yet. Have you set it up through ProctorU?
You know what? I know what's. There you are. Yeah. Crystal, was that you?
Okay. No, it's Caitlin. Sorry.
Oh, hey, Caitlin.
Hey, Dr. Cudd.
I was, I said fearsome foursome. I'm in the whiteboard setting, and only 4 tiles were showing.
I know.
I didn't realize
no problem.
I had a better attendance than I thought.
Yeah, I think this says there's 11 participants right now.
Cool. To answer your question, you should be able to register for the exam now.
Okay, I'll try again. I think it was Friday. Maybe I tried Friday and it said that the exam's not available.
Really?
I think I registered like last Wednesday.
Okay,
All right.
I will try again.
Yeah, I registered this morning.
I haven't checked to see who has and hasn't, but the only thing they're sticky about is they don't like you to do it within the last 72 hours. They will allow you to, the 72 hours prior to the exam, but
It charges you money for
they
it.
charge a little bit more. The school picks up the charge. I don't know if it'll pick up that overage if you do it at the last second.
It does not.
Sorry.
One thing too you want to keep an eye on, I noticed, was Dr. Cudd has 2 classes listed on there for midterms, and they're only 1 digit off. Like ours is 6541. I think the other one is 6542.
Yeah, that's a term 2 class. But Brian, very good point. Yeah. And I will check that.
Okay.
throughout
Yeah,
the
if other
week.
people have registered for it, it must be available. I'm not sure what happened.
If you have trouble, contact me. You guys have my cell number also for a reason. By the way, have all of you used ProctorU?
Yes.
Their vetting process will drive you nuts.
Terrible.
Yeah, I know. Technically, you can have till midnight Sunday night to finish the exam, but I would not schedule it for anything later, honestly, than 8 o'clock Sunday night, because their vetting process might take 30 or more minutes.
Is the
After
link,
they finish vetting you, that's when the 3-hour clock starts running.
is there a link on Moodle to the ProctorU, or did you email that to us?
I think in the spreadsheet, I've given you both a link and a telephone number. Not the spreadsheet, I'm sorry, in the course syllabus.
Syllabus, okay.
Yeah. I believe their link is, their website's just proctoru.com, but
I think I may have it saved from last semester. I didn't delete it.
if I could
Dr.
find
Cudd.
something else, I would. There's one other competitor out there, it's unproven. And I don't know anyone that's willing to go with them. So I don't want to use a class as guinea pigs for it. Guys, anything else before we shut down for the night?
Are they going to have the parameters? Can you hear me, Dr. Cudd?
I can. Are they going to have the what?
The parameters, like you're allowing us to have notes. I dealt with those guys.
I told them, I put down that you're allowed to have 2 sheets of prepared notes front and back, an unlimited number of scratch sheets. And hey, guys, you're going to need at least 10, right?
Right.
And a financial calculator. I think I put in there that you can have bathroom breaks. I hope I did. I think I did. Who am I talking to?
TC.
Oh, hey.
Hey.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. You know, I just had a bad experience with those guys one time. So.
We all have. I hate them. I'm sorry. I hate them.
Yeah, that's a good word.
There's a business opportunity.
Yeah, well, if you want to go for Shark Tank, maybe. Anything else, guys?
Just to clarify, it's one piece of paper on the front and on the back, or is it 2 pieces of paper on the front and on the back?
Your prepared notes, you're allowed to have 2 sheets of paper with anything on each, front and back.
Okay, so that's a
So
total.
it's like 4 pages of
Got it.
notes.
Awesome.
With a little tip of the hat to saving trees, since we use the front and back.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else, guys?
And this is TC again. I came in kind of late. Tonight
Hey,
is going
Mr.
to be on the midterm.
Sir?
Is what we covered tonight going to be on the midterm?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if you look at the course syllabus, this is the last chapter before the midterm, so yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
I guess we're good. Thank you so much, Dr. Cudd.
All right, guys. You have a good evening. I'm going to shut her down.
All right.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Good evening.